Has Helldivers been fixed? No, not particularly. Shortly after the release of Polar Patriots, I made a few videos on Helldivers discussing the state of the game at the time. In short, fun, but severely flawed with lots of core design problems. That part hasn't really changed, but it is getting better. There has been a very noticeable vibe shift since then. It's gone from super gamer hyper-balancing to a much more casual player-sided balance shift, which is a lot more fun to play with, props where props are due. I do still think that a lot of problems still remain, though, as remnants of the old design. If you watched the video I made on the difficulty a few months ago, most of the points that I made in it are still true. There's still way too much armor everywhere, a huge amount of weapons are not very good to worthless, you still die at random for reasons entirely outside of your control far too often, and it's still nigh unplayable solo, yet unlosable with 4. I don't want to just sit and whine, though. I've seen some other creators do that, and it's just extremely draining to listen to. I want to sit and discuss actual solutions to the things that I think are problems with the game instead of just complaining. It's good to see Arrowhead agree to change their mind on their balance philosophy, but I think they seriously need to have a rethink about some really core decisions with the combat design, namely enemy variety, stims, ragdolling, and armor. Right now, playing on 7 and above, there is so much armor. There's Hulks, there's Armored Striders, there's Hulks, there's tanks, there's Hulks, and there's more Hulks. Weapons require either the heavy armor pen or anti-tank keywords to kill Hulks from the front, and because there's so many of them, it is essentially required that you have either this broken thing, a gun rail, a Carl Gustav, a Quasar, though there are so many Hulks the fire rate often can't keep up, a laser cannon with the aim of a urologist, the advanced 50 cal AT4s, the heavy HMG, the black box, a javelin, or I guess the flamethrower? That might sound like a lot of options when put like that, but because of how support weapons are implemented, you're stuck with one for a whole mission, and it gets so tiring having to pull them out to deal with the Hulk attacks every time they come around. And because they're so frequent, it's usually a bad idea to use your support weapon for anything else in case you run out of ammo when another one shows up. You can't rely on airstrikes to kill them either. They've got just a little too much health for anything short of a 500 kilogram to kill reliably, and the 500 isn't exactly reliable in the first place. My eagles keep hitting the trees. There is one weapon in the entire game that isn't a support weapon that can damage Hulks from the front, which is the Senator. It is the only weapon that has heavy armor penetrating. Even the lightning guns apparently don't work because presumably the Hulks are made of super insulated 1000 times folded steel. I'm adding this bit for pedants. Technically, you can also kill them with the 2 flamethrowers from Freedom's Flame, but you need a spare afternoon and a Hulk that can't fight back. Every weapon apart from the Senator is capped out at medium armor pen, which is itself absolutely mandatory. The alternative, light armor penetration, is pretty much unplayably bad, when every enemy is a Devastator. The things you can damage with light armor pen are grunt troops and the heads of Devastators, and that's basically it. All of the primary weapons in the game at the time of writing total to 28, and 14, a full half of them, are light armor pen only, and so are basically useless past difficulty 6. 4, which is once again exactly half of the secondaries, are light armor penetrating too. I think fixing this would be relatively simple. Move every weapon up 1 armor penetration tier. What I mean by this is to take weapons that are currently light armor pen up to medium, and the ones that were medium up to heavy. And the Senator can become an anti-tank hand cannon because that seems kinda funny. Helldivers already have it pretty rough, and half of their arsenal not being able to touch most enemies is not great. Something not helped by how new enemies like the Armored Strider are actively removing combat options. There's no more flanking to take out the operator, you either shoot it in the unmentionables with medium armor pen, or it kills you. I think on paper there's a very reasonable rebuttal here with, well, clearly these guns aren't meant for these targets. They're meant for these targets. That would be entirely fair, except the guns with medium armor pen can kill grunts just as easily. They're not 2 weapons specializing in different roles, instead they're 2 weapons where one is both better and more applicable than the other one. Between the amount of reinforces that you get every mission, the ease of friendly fire, and the general lethality of the game, Helldivers 2 is very balanced around you dying a lot. I think this is a pretty questionable choice considering that dying is not exactly an enjoyable experience and it gets frustrating quick, especially when it's out of your hands and not your fault. Old and recent editions both show that the devs clearly think dying randomly is funny, which is, admittedly, true sometimes. But not every death should be completely unpredictable and unpreventable. Ragdolls are the main source of this issue, and it's a sister problem to stims. They go hand in hand. There is an excessive amount of ragdolling in this game, something the devs have kept in because it's funny, but it's common to the point where it just becomes really frustrating. Getting ragdolled is never your fault, because it just isn't ever predictable. Sometimes we'll get ragdolled because a Devastator fired a rocket that landed in the same square kilometer that you're residing in, and, well, I think the rest of this clip does speak for itself, you know, just a little bit. Other times, this will happen when you walk around a corner. The worst example of all, though, is this clip, where I am cowering in a corner, an enemy which is clearly much more intelligent than me, which I can't even see, tactically fires a rocket at point-blank range into the other side of the giant rock that I'm hiding behind, the seismic force from which is somehow enough to send me flying off like the floor is frictionless, and of course, directly into a tank's crosshairs. The devs publicly stated that to fix this issue, instead of cutting their losses and removing ragdolling, instead they're considering letting you stim in the air, which might be genuinely the worst solution. Stims are a mechanic I've always been frustrated with because on-demand invincibility should be a superpower that you get to use rarely, not something everyone has 4 to 6 of on them at all times. It plays into the only buff never nerf issue that I mentioned in my previous video. The most heinous enemy additions, like those armored striders with rockets, can now be wholly justified because the Helldivers have stims which are so powerful. If they didn't, and there was a more involved healing system, it would add interesting health management decisions that require more thought than press the stim button when you get shot at and sometimes die anyway. There were leaks of a medical backpack, which does give me hope for a stim overhaul. Like an armor overhaul, they're probably necessary things to touch up on for the gameplay to not get super stale. You could either go the route of fully replacing stims with something like bandages that take time to apply, but that's a lot of animation and prototyping work. Using what we have, which is admittedly pretty much just this one animation, I think injecting them should take way longer and require you to actually be in cover. Effective invincibility you get from them should be removed entirely. This, combined with some toning down to enemy damage to account for Helldivers being less powerful, would make combat significantly grittier and engaging. Forcing you to find cover to heal would lead to super dramatic situations like having to find a mortar hole to sit in to heal yourself while the automatons slowly close in, which sounds great and tense. With the way the system currently works, you are never challenged to truly think about your positioning because you have 4 get-out-of-jail-free cards. The only way you ever really die is from completely losing control of your character because an explosion went off somewhere on the same planet that you're standing on. A huge problem I had with Helldivers before was something I mused about for quite a long time in my previous video, which is crits. I've since been informed that these were instead, most likely, the head hitbox being impressively screwed up. I don't think this actually matters or changes much though, because given that you have no way of meaningfully protecting your head hitbox, especially when it doesn't match the visual, that does mean these were effectively crits anyway, especially for melee attacks. After some more testing recently, I concluded that looking different ways towards a melee enemy will change what region of the body they hit you on, and so sometimes I could tank 3 attacks, other times I couldn't. Given how random this was under strict testing conditions, this might as well be completely random damage in normal gameplay. For ranged attacks, which is the largest source of damage by a mile, the head hitbox shenanigans has been largely fixed in my experience. I haven't died from getting shot in the leg for a long time, but I'm not exactly sure when it was addressed because we fixed the head hitbox from being completely wrong isn't exactly something you can put in the patch notes because it'll look really bad. They also can't include, we reduced the range enemies are activated by player shots from infinity to 50 feet, because that too would reveal the bizarro world stealth mechanics to most people. This is a wonderful change though. For context, enemies are activated most often by players firing their weapons. Any enemies with a cone towards where you're firing would get activated, and this straight up didn't have a range limit before, so you would accidentally activate people on the other side of the planet. I did some quick testing and it's 50 feet. Shooting people beyond this range has led to weird situations where I can sometimes shoot enemies who don't care, but that's much less of a problem than how it used to work. It can be kinda silly to see a Hulk stare at me from just beyond the 50 meters mark, paralyzed in place as he watches a patrol get the right to vote. Shame for them, they never saw the AT-4 coming. Some other oddities I noticed while testing this are flamethrowers not activating enemies at all, enemies not caring when someone is killed with a throwing knife right in front of them, enemies sometimes getting baited by the Scorcher, other times instantly activating wall hacks and honing in on me, and this little guy who didn't want to shoot me no matter how hard I tried to get him to. What a cutie. I would like to see an expansion on the stealth side of things, as it still feels quite underdeveloped. The only addition to stealth since the game's launch were the throwing knives in Viper Commandos, and them technically being a grenade, and one that you can't even use as a knife at that, is really finicky thanks to how they take so long to draw and are about as easy to aim as CS lineups. Dream inclusions would be some active camo MGS cloak as a backpack, a silenced rifle support weapon, a noisemaker secondary, and some stealth-focused booster, like maybe showing idle enemy vision cones projected onto the floor like lights or something like that. I think there are stealth games that have done something similar. There was a pretty big inclusion recently, the Democracy Space Station, or the DSS. It naturally became the community's new punching bag. It was initially implemented in a bit of a confusing way, but this has been blown so far out of proportion you'd think the DSS was fueled by raw orphan children. Ultimately, I don't really think this matters because the DSS will have very little impact, if any at all, just due to how railroaded the strategy layer is, and frankly has to be, for development times. When you want to have cool, impactful set pieces that play into the future story, like that big black hole that Meridia turned into, and that the Illuminate will almost certainly come out of, you have to prep that a while in advance. All of it was leaked immediately after the game first came out, and this little graphic right here predicting basically every single story event is 8 months old. Ultimately, the strategy layer is a big smoke and mirrors game, which is admittedly extremely fitting. Super Earth's war against the Terminids and automatons is literally provably a farce, as there is one person behind it all, the GM at Arrowhead. Their job is basically to make sure the community doesn't reach any content that they're not meant to yet because it isn't ready. Now that you can see the supply lines on the map, this is actually extremely obvious. These planets here look threatened, but aren't actually connected at all, and so aren't in any danger because they're not ready to be played on yet. Being able to see the supply lines is definitely a good change, but I am very surprised that this managed to sneak through because it really does shatter the illusion in a really obvious way. I do wish that planets with less than 1,000 Helldivers present didn't regenerate their planet HP, so you could still feel like you're contributing even if you're not engaging in one of the campaigns with thousands of others, because as it is, trying to see some unique scenery means that you're not engaging with the war at all, which does take me out of it quite a bit. People have been fighting over Vernon Wells and Men Kent for almost as long as it takes for a kid to be born. I think looking for a break shouldn't be punished. Between bots and bugs, the automatons will always be the more interesting threat, narratively and gameplay-wise. Narratively, their intelligence lets them do cool stuff, like make reverse-engineered jetpacks out of Super Earth tech, whereas the bugs, they're just here to eat.
No, my Tesla tower!
Gameplay-wise, because almost all bugs are melee, they do a ton of damage, and so you end up often dying instantly. The only real way to make sure the Terminids are a threat despite their low range is to make them super bursty, which isn't very fun to play against. The automatons' ranged attacks, by contrast, allow for chip damage to, exist. There isn't really any fixing this, I don't think. Bots are inherently always going to be more interesting than Terminids because their ranged weapons allow for a less binary dynamic between them and players, as ironic as that might be for a race of robots. Back on the strategy layer, the Democracy Space Station is honestly a pretty neat addition, even if the benefits it does provide are underwhelming at best. Bombardments, eagles, and a free booster that everyone runs anyway definitely aren't anything to write home about, but I also don't think they're anything to complain about either. The DSS was never going to have any impact due to the railroaded nature of the war. If anything, it's probably a tool to better railroad the players, as the devs can very easily rig the votes as to where it should go. And so when it's released in such a state where it was more common for it to kill Helldivers than enemies, that's honestly just hilarious. Of course, the day it was launched, I saw someone on Reddit complain that it was insulting, because Redditors are the most entitled people in the world. A big source of the disappointment surrounding the DSS's launch was stuff that was leaked. It seemed like it was meant to launch with a full clan system and unique stratagems, but evidently that did not happen. I'm scared to use footage of any of the leaked stuff, but most of them are just various sizes of bombs, which we have plenty of already. I'm most excited for SEAF reinforcements, which is something that Helldivers could really benefit from. SEAF stands for the Super Earth Armed Forces, and they're an entirely unseen, standing army with numbers that presumably dwarf the Helldivers Corps. Well, you do see them in missions occasionally, but only ever as corpses. If there were missions with Seif being deployed as reinforcements, or with you reinforcing them, I think it would be an excellent addition. Showing the Helldivers as an elite corps by contrasting them with the armed forces would be a wonderful addition, and I'm so surprised it has not happened yet. I want this more than any balance changes, more than the multi-crewed vehicles that have been in the files since release. I want this way more than anything they could ever possibly add. Now, you don't make multiple 20-minute long videos on a game that you've played several hundred hours of unless you really like it. I really do like Helldivers 2, and this video is my best attempt at condensing my thoughts on it a few months down the line, which a few people did request. And do leave a comment if you have any ideas for the game, because I read all of them, and I would love to hear what other people think. I should clarify, this isn't engagement farming or anything like that. I genuinely want to read other people's suggestions for stuff, like what to do with the DSS or stratagem ideas. Thanks to all my patrons, Emmy and Potato especially. Like, comment, subscribe, you know the drill, and have a good night.